Right, okay, before we get started, I want to ask you, who are you, or more sort of really, why are you here? Oh, what tricky questions this early on. Right, you've got 4 options. Shopper. That's someone who's kind of coming to this because you want ideas. You want to see which bits you can take and pick and have and use. Explorer, but the shopper tends to be someone who's not really the difference between that and explorer is the explorer is exploring new ideas and wants to get involved and try the experience out. So this one is quite active. The shopper is kind of more of a, I'm coming and looking in the window and then I might take that bit away with me and that bit away from me. So the difference between those two is there. Vacationer is someone who's come along to, actually, do you know what, I just want to get away from the day-to-day thing. And that could be 2 ways. It may be, actually, I just want to get away from the normal routine of going home on the train tonight and I'll come to a flash mob thing. It might be actually, I want to get away from how things are working in my organisation and look at something new and exciting and different. Or prisoner, I'm hoping no one's going to go for this one here. It's more relevant in a meeting inside working hours, but it's the kind of person that's coming to the meeting or the session because they've been told they have to go.
Like the barmaid.
Like Lindsay. Oh, she's not paying attention. So, right, can I just get a quick hands up? Anyone in this shopper space? And there's genuinely no right or wrongs. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 shoppers. Who have we got in the explorer space? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyone in the vacationer space? Nobody wants to admit that one. Anyone in the prisoner space? Tim's thinking about putting his hand up there. John made me come. Okay, so we're mainly up in this space, which is good to know. I'll come back to that one in just a minute, but I was just kind of curious as to where you were all sort of seeing yourselves on that very, very simple sort of 4 options of coming into a meeting. Now, ignoring, even if you don't do those, when you sort of start thinking about people through those lenses, you can kind of see them around the room. You'll find it in your meeting. The prisoner is kind of sitting back, not engaging, sort of arms crossed, that kind of sort of behaviour. The vacationer tends to sort of like, yeah, this is great, but they're completely tuned out and not really active on things. You've got your shoppers who are probably nodding intently, but don't say a word throughout the whole thing, maybe scribbling furiously, but not actually engaging. And then the explorers, the positive explorers, the ones that are sort of offering ideas and getting involved, or maybe even slightly carried away, the really crazy gung-ho ones, the ones that kind of, yeah, actually let me take over and draw on the board and kind of dominate the meeting. So you've got those weird mixes of people. But if you look at people through those lenses, you've got a different idea of actually how to engage them and how to manage them. And we're going to come back to that, so I'm just going to leave that there because that will become more relevant later on. So this hopefully is why we're here. Is everybody here for a Retrospectives masterclass? Always good to check these things at the start of a session, I find. So let me just move that to the side, actually. Hang on. Okay, so we're all here for the right session. This is marvellous, and I managed to get the date right and everything, so well done, me. Our plan of action for tonight, our mission, if you will. We have a mission. Did you know you had a mission when you came tonight? Congratulations, we have a mission. Our mission is to answer these questions. Number 1, what are retrospectives? Number 2, why should the PMO care about them? Number 3, aren't they just a kind of Scrum Agile thing? Number 4, isn't a retro just a glorified lessons learned meeting? And number 5, what time will the pizza get here? We will answer all of these questions this evening, I promise. Now, just out of interest, who here has retrospectives happening in their organisations? Good. Yes, seeing my team put their hands up, which is reassuring. How many of you are, when you say those happen in your organisations, how many of you are actually engaged in those happening when they happen? Couple of hands, okay. How many of you are aware of the outputs of those and see tangible things happening because you have retrospectives in your organisations? Ooh. Interesting, you 3 put your hands up for the first, not for the second. That's, yeah, interesting, okay. Put your hands up for yes that, but not about the outputs of them. And that's the final thing we're going to do tonight. Because this is an interactive session, this is not about me standing here and lecturing you. Has everyone been in the office today? Everyone worked hard today? Everyone a bit tired at the end of the day? So if I stand here and talk for 3 hours, it's going to be a bit like that. Yeah, so we're going to actually do retrospectives because I can talk to you about retrospectives until the cows come home, but the only way you really get this stuff in and embed it and get the learning out of it is by actually getting involved in doing a retrospective. So we're going to try and go through 2 or 3 formats tonight, certainly share a few ideas with you, and it should give you enough to go back to your environments and either run retros would be great. It would allow you to go in and actually look at some of the retros running and go, why are you doing it that way? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And ask some questions that as a PMO, you can do as a critical friend or as a coach or as a teacher, depending on what your relationship with the projects is at that time. So that's kind of what the aim for tonight is. Are we all still in the right place? Whew, that's good, that's reassuring. Okay, let's start with the basic stuff. So this is a typical project lifecycle. We initiate a project, plan a project, execute, control and close one. Happy with that as a general project? Yeah? Magic, good. Definitions of projects. Does anyone want to give us a definition of a project? Temporary, unique, that kind of stuff, yeah? Now, I'm glad you said that because there was one particular word there that I wanted to pin down. Unique. Unique is a word that really bugs me on projects. And I think it's something that's done a lot of damage in a lot of organisations over the last few years. There's a lot of organisations say we're going to move to being a project-centric organisation. And now, if you accept that projects are unique, I would argue that there is a problem with our project methodology having this step near the end of gathering lessons learned. Because if these things are truly unique, what are you learning lessons from and for what? It's a unique thing. The next thing is going to be entirely different. And the answer to that is I would argue that in most cases, the projects you're delivering in your organisations are actually not that unique. Now, any project managers in? Marvellous, we can talk about them, that's great. You're a coach, it's fine. Project managers will have will insist to you their projects are unique. They will insist, and when you argue with them and say, well, look, no, hang on, didn't we move a few computers from that side of the office to that side of the office a few weeks ago? Isn't this basically the same thing? Oh, no, everyone's unique because the people are different. The stakeholders are different. Actually, that was Dell 350Bs and these are Lenovo 340Cs. It's entirely different. It's a unique project. And one of the things the PMO brings to the table, PMO, I think for me, certainly blurs a lot of those lines between the project world and the operational world. Because in most cases, we're not, are we all in sort of permanent PMOs here or are people in temporary PMOs? Which one of those? You're in temporary. Anybody else in a temporary PMO? So there's a couple of temporary PMOs. And even those, do those temporary PMOs live within a project or do they extend outside the life of a project? Yours is within, because you're doing a big program of work. Within? Program, so project, so within the program, but outlasting the projects within the program. That's a whole different conversation. Sorry?
Me too, I'll tell you.
Okay, that's a whole different situation to explore. So, but generally where PMOs are looking at that bigger picture outside of just the project, and where the project manager may be happy that they've got their own little unique project going on, what we actually see is that it's far less unique. We see those commonalities around the business. And that's generally why you get project PMO people that are far more interested in learning the lessons from projects, looking at how we can standardize and repeatabilize. And I would argue actually a lot of what the PMO does is increasingly less about managing the project, but looking at how we can apply operational lessons to what we do in the project world. Things like continuous improvement of our processes, of our techniques, of our templates, and so on and so forth. So I just want to take you through my perception of how lessons learned works in a lot of organizations at the end of a project. This is certainly how it's happened for me. I used to be a project manager in the past, and this was basically how lessons learned. I was working in a well-known bank at Canary Wharf, and we would do the project, and there would be a spreadsheet to fill in for lessons learned. because this would then go into the report. As it's a Prince 2 project, there was a lessons report that went up to the project board, and thus everything was good. So you write in your spreadsheet in the column that says lessons very diligently. Right, we went to absolutely hell and back on this one because the facilities team kept reinventing what we had to do every 2 minutes in terms of access to the building from the back after 6 o'clock at night. What we learned from that was you need to agree these things up front with them and get that in writing so there are no surprises. That seems like a fairly sensible lesson. Useful to the next project that's trying to do things, right? So what actually happened with that was they looked at it and it's like, not really happy with that one. It's like, what's wrong with that? Whoa, it sounds like you're blaming facilities. It's like, okay. So can you go away and rewrite that so it doesn't look like we're blaming facilities? So like, okay. There were some issues with some of the documentation around getting into the office at night. So, okay, yeah, that sounds like it's more about documentation than delivering stuff. So can we tune that one down a bit? There were issues with working late at night. Now, is anyone offended by that? No, that sort of sounds okay. So you end up with this lesson that everyone's agreed on by committee and is actually completely and utterly useless to the next poor project manager, assuming they find it at all. And the reason I say assuming they find it at all is because in reality what happens is this spreadsheet then gets cut and pasted into the Word document. The Word document then gets PDF'd. The PDF then gets emailed to a board who don't really understand it anyway, who only look at the first page where it says how much did we spend and have we kind of got it done. They say well done, and you never see the document again. It goes somewhere into SharePoint and gets filed over there. Now I'm being a little bit unfair. That's my experience, a little bit, only a little bit unfair. Lessons learned at the end of a project is a good thing, and this man has a great book coming out in the new year on lessons learned, so I'm not running off entirely, but that's sort of been my experience of them. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I kind of want to do that compare and contrast with what we're talking about today, which is birthdays. No, it's retrospectives. Retrospectives, stay focused, John. We're talking about retrospectives. However, birthdays. Birthday, I want you to imagine either your birthday or that moment when you're the day after getting back from your annual holiday. And the reason I've chosen both of those is because if you're like me, you do the same thing at both of those times. You do that little bit of reflection. Now they're kind of different at both those times. You sort of sit there on your birthday and you have that moment. I've got kids screaming around the house and it's chaos. And maybe it's just that little bit of time when you've gone downstairs, you've thrown cereal and iPads at them, and you've wandered back upstairs again with your cup of tea, and you just have that just 3 minutes with the bedroom door shut to yourself and go, it's my birthday. Well, my goodness, how did I get to this age? And you think, actually, how did last year go? I'm still in the same company. God, 6 years now. Am I happy with that? Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Let's stick with that one for a little while longer. That's good. We didn't go away as a family last year. Maybe we should do something about that. God, who's that guy in the mirror? Whoa. Well, this year we are going to the gym. Well, this year we're going to buy some trainers. Let's start with that and see how it goes. Okay. And change them. That's what we need. I need one of those magic mirror things. That's an even better idea. I like that one. And you do that kind of reflection. Coming back from holidays, the same thing. You sit there the next day and go, that was great. And you get the post-holiday blues. You go, right, okay, what are we going to do next? That was awesome. But I tell you what, I'm never going to be stupid enough to do a city break with a 3 and a 4-year-old ever again. Well, next year we're doing a beach holiday, and you start planning what the next thing is. Now, those things are distinctly different from doing a lessons learned at the end of a project. Because whilst that year has finished, the project that is John's life has not finished. And actually, I'm carrying on. What I'm doing is basically taking stock of what just happened in that year. I'm thinking of what I want to learn from that and take away from that, and what I'm going to apply and do differently for the year going forwards. And that's very, very, very different to applying lessons for a project, writing them down, filing them for the next person to look at. It's that idea of continuously improving my life as I go through from birthday to birthday, holiday to holiday, situation to situation, etc. I'd like to offer up this definition of a retrospective. A retrospective is a meeting where the team gathers to inspect and adapt their methods and teamwork. So it's a meeting. Everyone's boo straight away, meetings, we hate meetings. But if we look at this, it's where the teams, there's a few key words in this. The team are gathering to inspect and adapt their methods and teamwork. Two of those are about what they're doing, inspecting and adapting. And the end bit is what they're doing them too. They're looking at their methods, how they're working, what they're doing, and they're looking at their teamwork. How do we function as a team? Now, if you look at normal lessons learned, it tends to focus on the methods, what we did, how we did it. The teamwork bit is, if I'm allowed to use Ken's word and say unique, it's quite unique to retrospectives. There's no point in doing the teamwork bit in a project lessons learned because the project's finished. That team has disbanded. That team, you could argue, was unique. You will never get exactly that group of people together again at the same time. And if you do, they'll be in different headspaces, they'll be pulled in different directions, have different priorities. So what we're doing in these sessions is inspecting and adapting. So we're looking at what we did, inspecting is looking, and adapting. So we're changing as we go. Not revolutionary change. Adapting implies small incremental changes, which is what we're doing here. And we're looking at the methods and teamwork, so both of those. Sometimes you'll only focus on one of those. Sometimes you're going to focus on the other one of those. And sometimes you'll focus on both of those. So that's kind of what we're aiming to do in a retrospective. This is what they look like. So one of the big differences between a pure project environment where you've got a start, middle, end, project finishes, and then there's another project and another project and another project. One of the big things about if you're running a truly agile environment is you've got this idea of working continuously. This is where Agile beautifully blurs the lines between a project organization and a purely operational organization and starts to confuse the boundaries of those. Because what we're really doing with Agile, any kind of Agile, whether it's Kanban, whether it's Scrum, whether it's any other flavor that you want to think of, is we're actually taking operational ideas and seeing how we can run projects with them. That idea of continuous improvement, continuous introspection. And this is kind of what we're doing here. So there's the iteration, which is actually the doing stuff bit. So if you're working Scrum, that might be a sprint, where we're actually incorporating stuff, we're building stuff, we're delivering stuff. And then we're running through a retrospective meeting at the end, where we're setting the stage, which we'll come on to, gathering data, generating insight into what we're doing, deciding what to do, how we adapt, and then we're closing out the retrospective, and then we're on to our next cycle again. And that's how this works. Now, as an organization here, we work with both agile teams and what we call traditional waterfall teams. There's a very good reason for that, is that one size does not work for everything. One size does not fit all. Amongst the projects we do, Ticketmaster is still rolling out into new markets. We go into new countries, we go into new market segments. Now, for me, that doesn't really work as an agile project because I might need to find an office. I might need to work with new banks. I might need to engage with new local partners. I might need to train people up prior to a launch of a new product or feature. And then I need the technology delivering at exactly the same time. That feels a lot more to me like something I want to do a work breakdown structure for, a sequence for, and actually plan out a critical path and then plan those activities through. Doing that in 2-week chunks doesn't really work for me because the software may be ready, but have I hired the right people? And actually, I can't do that in a 2-week chunk. I need a kind of 4 or 5 month lead time for some of the things like, I don't know, getting BT to get cables in place and those kind of things. So some projects, it makes a lot more sense to run with a traditional waterfall approach. Others, it makes a lot more sense to run with an agile approach. And one of the things that's beautiful and what I like that's happened certainly in the last couple of years, maybe more so for some of you who may be more mature than me on these things, is that if you look 2-3 years ago, there was a feeling of religion about some of the agile methodologies and approaches. There was that kind of zeal and passion and argument that everything else in the world was wrong and this is the only possible way of delivering things. Everything else, you'd get those snorts of derision. And at times you felt that people were kind of sort of locking themselves in their own little closed camp and singing and praising the Agile Manifesto at every opportunity. And quite frankly, it all got a bit weird. Now, We've moved on from there a lot. I think as a community, Agile people in general, and the PMO have played a big part in that. Because we're looking across these areas. Those of us who have PMOs that are actually able to look across the Agile projects and the waterfall projects. And what we see when we start looking are synergies, where you can combine those two things together. You see things like Prince to Agile popping up, which is an interesting approach. But even in organizations, you see opportunities where actually a bit of that can be useful over here. Maybe we can merge those two things together. Maybe a waterfall project can draw, or a very pure Prince 2 project could have a work package that is delivered by an Agile team where they're working continuously, but you're dropping this feature story in, they're delivering it, it's coming back out again, and that's delivered and works for your waterfall project as well. So there's no reason why those two things can't work in harmony. And then you look into things like Scrum, and you find things like retrospectives, and you have these light bulb moments where you go, hang on a minute. If I've got this idea of retrospectives running in my Agile teams, and they're having one of these every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, whatever their cadence is they're working to, and I see them continuously improving, I see the team getting closer, I see the team expressing what their frustrations are amongst themselves, how they're going to solve things. Why can't I do that on a waterfall project? Why am I waiting until the end of the project or the end of a phase to pull together this very, very sanitized document for somebody else to read? And I said somebody else quite deliberately there, because if you're doing those retros on a regular basis, it's not for somebody else, it's for the team. The team are gathering to do this exercise and adapt for themselves, which is another major difference in what we're doing here. And that's what we do here. We run waterfall projects when we have the need to run waterfall projects, but even when we're running those, the teams get together on a regular basis and sit down and explore how they're working, what they want to change about what they're doing, and try and avoid those things ever being a lessons learned session at the end of a project, because they're learning instantly in the moment and they're changing their way of working. There was a real example today. One of the teams was working, who's heard of OKRs? So OKRs are a way of setting objectives that are stretching across an organization. Do Google them because they're awesome. But we were working with one of the team, well, one of the project managers was working with a team on that today. And as they were working through it, the people they were working with, as people in different countries, and they came back and said, this is really not working. We're finding this hard to comprehend. And we looked at why that was, and we were taking quite a sort of by the book, working through a process with them. So we had them brainstorming at the beginning. And what we found was actually brainstorming is quite hard when you're remote and on the phone anyway. And plus, actually, where they were at the moment, they were in quite a stressful place. They had a lot of work going on, a lot of distractions, and that really wasn't working. And we looked at that, and that process has now changed. We're going to them on Monday with a straw man mock-up of what we think those should look like, and they can either violently agree with them or go along with them, or we make fine adjustments, and we've deliberately left some areas where we know we'd like their input on, but we've started them off with something a lot more structured. Now, if we hadn't had that little retro refinement session, we'd have probably gone through 4 sessions of this, and it would have just got worse and worse and worse. But having those instant reflect and adapt sessions with the team together has allowed us, in that example, to try and cut that one off at the pass and improve the way they're working together. Another point, Tim brought this one up and I added it into the slide, so I hope I haven't stolen it from him for later. But a safe environment where everyone has an equal voice in the meeting. And again, this is powerful because going back to my example of being in a well-known banking company and writing these highly sanitized lessons learned for a document, that's not a safe environment. The reason you're sanitizing those is because everyone's scared of upsetting somebody. And the objective almost is, in cases, about delivering something as bland as possible, not something that is going to actually improve things as much as possible. The whole point of having a retro is that everyone in the room feels safe, feels comfortable, can express their opinions openly, even if they know those might upset people and irritate people. But it's about actually, this is how I feel about what's happening. This was my experience of working through this. These were the challenges, and the team looking at that and the team working through how those go. Unless you create that environment, I'm telling you now, your retrospectives are not going to work. If everyone's sitting there, and if you as PMO people going in to have a look at how a retro is working, if you find it's an environment where somebody is standing at the front and leading, maybe someone calling themselves a scrum master, leading from the front, and everyone is waiting for their turn. And when somebody does start talking, they get kind of shut down and they're shut down. That probably isn't generating the type of insight and learning that you would like out of one of those sessions, because you're not in a safe environment when everyone has an equal voice at the meeting. So this is quite a powerful one. It's quite important to set the scene on that and create an environment where everyone feels that actually they can be open, they can talk about what's happening, and they can share that knowledge in a safe environment in the room. One of the things with meetings, meeting minutes, tend not to do any minutes for retrospective meetings. One reason, because I hate doing minutes. I might just stop there. No, one of the reasons is I hate doing minutes. A real reason is actually the minutes of the meeting, what happens during the meeting, is actually almost irrelevant outside of the meeting. That's the session the team has had together doing this, exploring, generating insights. Now this bit here about deciding what to do, what you're going to do to adapt and move forward, that is everything. If you're going to capture anything out of the meeting, it's the actions and insights that you're taking forwards, and those come out. So no minutes of who said what and he said, she said, and then there was a big argument, then Dave cried for a bit in the corner, we all had some sweets, we all calmed down, we all came back in again, and we got none of that. That's for the room, and that's almost a sort of secret thing that happens between those people, if you will. That's the discussion that's here, the gathering data, the generating insight. This bit where we've decided what to do and we're taking away those insights and then we're adapting, that's the powerful bit. So the thing that should be coming out of it is action and actions. All good? All with me? Happy days? Yes, really good point. So I'll tell you a couple of agile horror a couple of retro horror stories. I was looking at just doing a bit of a health check on a project a few years ago, and I said, it was kind of towards the end of it, I said, oh, by the way, I'd just like to come in and sit on a couple of your ceremonies. I'll be quiet, because I can do that sometimes. I just want to come and see if I said, when's your next retro? Oh, well, we can schedule one if you want. I was like, right, yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, we've not done one for a while. When was your last one? Before Christmas. Right, why are you not doing retros? Oh, well, we were doing retros. We ended up giving up because the same things just kept coming up again and again and again. I was like, then fix them. Which was a fairly obvious answer. But actually, when I sat down with them, they'd got themselves into a cycle of turning it into a moaning session about things around them, where they'd got themselves into this almost victim state where they would sit down, and it was a session where you'd all moan about how terrible things were and how if it wasn't for the people around them, they would be amazing and could change the world. But they were the victims in this organisation and everything was against them. So they'd all end up sitting there, they'd go through the process and they'd end up with actions, but those actions were for everybody else. Do we think things changed? No, because everybody else wasn't in that meeting. Everyone else hadn't gone on that journey with them, understood the pain points, had that social connection and commitment with their peers as they went through it and wanted to change the world. So Tim's absolutely right. In the retrospective, the actions that come out of it need to be for the team to deliver. If there is a problem with people around the team, well, let's discuss how we can interface with them differently. How can we make it easier for them to get the right information to us at the right time? What if we give them a template? What if we write down what a really good example looks like and hand that to them? Would that help? Actually, have we tried engaging with their line management? Okay, let's try that. And this is into this idea of what do we do? Well, let's agree a few things we're going to try to see if we can improve the situation. Then you're incorporating those experiments, going around the next loop. You're still delivering stuff and you come back next time. How did that work? That didn't work. Let's try something else. How do we go about this a different way? How do we bring those people along on our journey with us? And it's a lot more about the team looking for solutions rather than the team being victims. That's a good point. Thanks, Tim. This is a retro format that works. It really does, and it's quite simple. Setting the stage is arriving at a meeting. You are probably all very familiar with the idea of setting a stage at the start of a meeting. It's the idea of bringing people in, just getting them in the right frame of mind for the meeting. Now, it can just be a quick chat. How are you feeling today, Chris?
You good?
Good. It can be as simple as that around the room, just getting everyone to share an idea. It could be something like this. Tripod up. Who are you? How do we feel today? This might be mixed up. You may have all turned around today and said, we're in this Explorer shopper space today. Great. I can guarantee during the week you will go to meetings where you feel like a prisoner. I can guarantee you'll go to meetings where you feel like you're a vacationer. And exploring those as a team is interesting. So we've all just put these things down. Great. We may just look at it and go, okay, that's interesting. What do we think about that? Let's move on. Or it may be, if everyone is putting down they feel like a prisoner, that suddenly may be the basis of your retrospective. It's like, okay, let's just pack everything else away. Let's just work on why we feel that way and explore that one, which is fine. We're looking at the teamwork and how we're generating insight from that. Gathering data, we're going to explore that in a bit. This is about gathering information for your retrospective. So normally you're looking back, retrospective, you're looking backwards. You're normally looking back over a fixed time period or over the period that you're working on a specific event. So if you're looking at a sprint, you'd be looking at maybe the 2-week period. If you're looking at a period where you released a brand new product, it might be sort of 6 weeks or whatever it was that you're looking at. So that kind of horizon is what you're agreeing on. And you're gathering data about that period. That can be a number of formats. We're going to explore a couple of bits and bobs in a minute on how we generate the data, how we gather data. Data's great. A lot of companies have a lot of data at the moment. Data lakes, swamps in some cases. But crucially, data is worthless unless you do this next step, which is generating insight. We've got all this data. What next? What does this really mean to us? Let's explore what this means and what we're getting out of it, which leads us to deciding what to do, because we want to do stuff with this. So we've generated this insight. We now understand some of the areas we've explored. What are we going to do about that? And that's the important bit. I have genuinely seen retrospectives where people have sat there with a chart and said, right, well, what went well and what do we want to change? And they've marked things down in those boxes and said, well done, that's great. Let's save that document away and let's go to the pub. And there were no actions. There were no commitments. That's not a retrospective. That's putting things in a spreadsheet. And it's very, very different. Decide what to do, team commit to the action that we're taking away from it, and then close it down with a final goodbye and reflect on the retrospective. Now, when I first started here, I'm now I'm John McIntyre, I'm head of projects and PMO here at Ticketmaster. Did I forget that bit? I'm here all week, yeah. I'm head of projects. Well, exactly. Now I feel it's going all right. Tim Hughes, senior coach at Ticketmaster, yeah. Exactly right. So I'm head of projects and programs here. When I first started, I was running the PMO team. And we moved into this building not long after I started. We were kind of the first team that moved in. It was empty apart from the PMO for about a week. And it was great because we were exploring with the core PMO team. So that I figured out that from an Agile perspective, a PMO really runs Agile. Because basically you work on a cadence that aligns with finance, which is generally a month. And last time every PMO I've run tends to have a reasonably fixed budget, be that money or be that people. I have a PMO team of 2, 3, whatever it may be, and that doesn't change. And basically, therefore, the only way you can get stuff done is basically force ranking the work you have to do. And you work out what the really important reports are that you have to do, and the really important people are you please, and you work down that list. Some stuff doesn't get done every month. But you've got that list and you're working through it. And if you've got it ranked, then you're doing the most important stuff, the things that matter first. Which basically is what an Agile project does. You have a backlog, you have your fixed time scale, and you work your way through it from the top down. So PMOs are quite agile. And if you accept the PMOs agile, then let's take some of these processes and ceremonies and bring them into the PMO. So we brought retrospectives in. There were 2 reasons for that for me. One was because I wanted us to do them. But secondly was actually I felt the PMO had a role to play in helping the organisation, not just marking them and auditing and controlling them, but actually helping projects succeed, helping Agile teams succeed, helping them develop and improve themselves. Now, what you see quite often with teams, even the best teams that are running retrospectives, is those retrospectives get stale. They will find a format that works for them and they will repeat that format to death until they get bored with it. Do you remember when we did the definition a little while ago of that one there, methods and teamwork? There's a lot of stuff that can go on in those. Quite often you'll find teams focus on the methods. How do we work? Or if it's a very, very technical team, they might focus very much on the code. What was the quality like? What were the bugs like? What were the defects like? How can we improve the way we do that coding? How can we improve the handover to test? How can we improve the handover to design, or from design, all those kind of things. And sometimes when you go in as a PMO person looking in on those teams from the outside, you may be able to go in and say, have you thought about the teamwork side of this a little bit? How are you guys getting on? How about we do a retro that is purely about how you feel? And that gets awkward quite quickly. And I highly recommend it. It's hilarious. No, it's valuable. Valuable. I meant valuable. But the ability to go in and mix those things up is quite useful. So for the PMO team, what we did was say, okay, we're going to run a retro for the PMO, by the PMO. Each of the team is going to run one of these. We rotate it every month. Crucially, you must use an entirely different format we've not done before. Even more crucially, it doesn't matter if we absolutely balls it up. Because this is a safe space, it's a safe environment in our retro, and it'll be fun. And we can try risky, crazy things, and if they don't work, it doesn't matter. And therefore what we did at the end of each one, we did a very quick, did this work for us? What would we have done differently? What should we change the next time around? What's the learning from this? So we got to the stage where we're even retroing your retrospective. And we'll do that at the end of today and see how tonight went as well for you guys. After I've filled you with beer and pizza, and hopefully you're all quite cheerful. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk through. That is a visual version of what I just said there. So starting our retro, setting the stage, which is kind of what we talked about there. Gathering data using a method that we'll go through in a second, or a few methods. Generating insight from that data, literally joining the dots there, and then bringing it back to deciding what we do and closing the retrospective down. Now, the reason it's drawn like this is because actually by gathering the data, you're broadening people's horizons, expanding their mindset. Let's think widely about what we did. Let's look at this very, very broadly. And as we're generating the insights and deciding what to do, we're bringing that down to a few clear actions that everybody can focus on. So this is kind of how the data and how the thinking works. You're going quite wide at the beginning, and towards the end of the retrospective, you're really, really bringing it down with laser focus to 3, 4, 5 actions that you want to take forwards. Less is generally more on those. Yes, so let me try and paraphrase that for Tim, who was struggling. He's not getting any younger, bless him. So basically, if I've got this right, we're saying, so you've got Agile running in your organization, you've got Agile teams working in projects. So they're doing a continuous method within a start, middle, end framework. If they are doing retros regularly during that framework, when they get to the end of the project, should they be doing lessons learned in the traditional sense, or are we assuming that by that point, actually, this has done its job and you don't need the lessons learned? Hey, there we go. I did listen. So there's no right answers, is the first one. I'll tell you what we do here. And I will also tell you why I think we're lucky that we can get away with doing what we do here. Because it certainly wouldn't work for all organisations. It wouldn't work at organisations I've been at previously. What we do here is take the retrospective process to the extreme of that. So we do, when we're closing down a project, we do a much larger retrospective. Sometimes that means we actually get people to submit things in advance. If we're doing it online, we tend to use a tool like Trello or something to actually gather data and work through that process with them. What we then do, there's nothing that's then filed away from that. We look at the focus is, again, on the action that comes out of it, not the lesson that comes out of it. So what generally comes out is what are we changing about our processes and the way we work that will avoid that being a problem for us in the future? Yeah. So so that was the problem. We've articulated the problem. What's the thing we can change in the organisation that fixes that? Sometimes it's a how we do projects thing. Well, let's look at our internal body of knowledge for delivering projects, our framework, our templates, whatever that may be. Let's look at how we change those. Here we have guidelines for projects rather than policy or process for guidelines. We have templates, but we have the guidelines, and they're in a wiki. And there's a lot of emphasis on the project managers updating those regularly. They're expected to refine and keep those alive as they go. So that does come out of the retros. I don't like having a pile of lessons learned at the end of a project. What I like at the end of a project is people in the team committing to saying, okay, we're going to go away and rework the risk guidelines. We're going to go away and rework the going into a new market in Eastern Europe with a different language and problems with how we handle tax locally guidelines, whatever guidelines those may be. Now, why I'm lucky with that and why that won't work everywhere is because when you have projects that are truly temporary, when you have large programs that are for a fixed period of time, when you do have things that are a little bit more on the unique scale than others, then it's quite hard to do that because there may not be that internal process or documentation to do. If you're doing a project like, I don't know, for example, refitting an entirely a large office, which is a one-off piece of work, you're refitting it, and most of the people working on that project will then scatter to the four winds and go off to do different projects again. That process is a lot harder. Finding those things that you can update in an operational world that help the next team out is a lot harder to do. When you've got a temporary PMO, not a permanent PMO, that is a lot harder to do. In those cases, sometimes the best thing you can do is do a lessons learned note to the next project manager, sorry, there's no money left, or whatever, those kind of notes to the next person, and hope they pick it up and hope that helps them in the future, leaving those letters, those notes to the future. So which is not perfect, but is sometimes the best we can do in those situations. So I'm quite lucky that I can do that because I do have quite a small, tight team, and they do seem to have hung around for quite a long time, and I'm hoping they'll stay around for a little while longer, which means that learning does turn into insights. And if it's permanent people working here, they tend to have more of a drive to actually update the processes for next time. So that's what we do. It's definitely a great process, but it totally won't work everywhere because not all environments are like the one that I've got here. Yeah. That is, the comment there was Shane's known project managers who actually won't let the PMO or anyone else into their retros because they want them to be those frank, harsh, free-talking, what we said earlier, safe environments where everyone can talk freely, and that's fine. I mean, the moment you go in for you and me saying we're just going to sit here and not say anything, it'll be fine, carry on. That gets bristles up. That gets everyone instantly uncomfortable. Why is John suddenly in here? Why is the PMO suddenly in here? My best advice in those situations is think about what you're doing. Rather than going in as an auditor, where can you add value to that process? And what I would offer up in those situations is actually, can you go in and facilitate a retro for them? Because suddenly, you're actually doing something useful, you're bringing something to the table, you're part of the team. Actually, a Scrum project manager, you're always standing up doing your retros. How about you take part in the retro rather than trying to be this impartial facilitator, and I'll facilitate one for you. Same rules apply. No one talks about what happens in the room. We only talk about actions, that's all good, but facilitate the session instead. Suddenly you're there, you're not the person overseeing what they're doing anymore. I find that works quite well. And you're not seen as the auditor, you're seen as somebody in that critical friend helping them. And what you often find from that actually is if you do an okay job or you bring a different idea to the table, then actually the project manager's kind of saying, I quite like that, maybe we could do something different, and they're suddenly opening up and talking a lot more. It helps you be seen as somebody that's actually adding value to the process rather than picking holes in the process. So give that one a go. Let's see if they let you in. They still might not, which is fine. But again, then you work with what you've got. Are the actions coming out? Is the team demonstrating they're continuously improving? If actually that team is spiraling and getting worse and worse and worse, then again, the focus is not on the meeting, the focus is on the outcomes, and you're then having a conversation with the project manager. If your PMO has got a governance and control remit, then you're having that conversation. Well, okay, I appreciate that is a black box meeting that we don't go into, which is fine. However, let's talk about performance, because what we're seeing here is a problem with the outcome. Let's talk about how we resolve that. It could be an option that we have a look at those meetings. It could be we look at what's around it. It could be we look at other things. But that's the way you then go back and start exploring that one. If you're seeing continuous improvement, maybe you don't need to go into that meeting. Maybe there's no need to audit it. Okay. Okay, it's 7:20, so what we're going to do, because you've all been sitting there for a little while, and I did promise we'd be getting up and doing things, we are going to move around and we're going to try and get a bit hands-on with some of this retro stuff. So, what you will see around the room, I'm just going to go back to the, let's keep on that one. Okay, so setting the stage, gathering data, generating insights, deciding what to do, and closing the retrospective out. Now, what I've got on the wall here, you may have noticed there's pieces of paper around the room.